This podcast is part of the Shrimp Queen Network.
Visit facebook.com/Shrimp Queen Network to see more great podcasts.
Hear them.
Hear more great podcasts.
Good job.
Thanks for listening. Back to 10 for 10's Shocktober specials. So quick aside before we really get into this week's episode. Sorry, I'm shifting my chair. Today's episode is going to deal with very, very mature content matter. If you are sensitive at all to violence and murder and assault of a sexual nature, perpetrated
anything fucked up really
towards and torture, anything perpetrated towards people, specifically young men and young women, just skip this episode and come back next week. Because today's subject matter is definitely the darkest we've ever gone, probably the darkest we ever will go, even though we're going to be treating it with a very try to make light
delicate
of it. Yes. Lightly, not make light of it. So yeah, no judgment if you don't want to listen to this one. But if you are here to be educated, because really I tried to go as educational as possible with this one. It's not really as subjective as some of my other lists. It's more or less just who these people were.
And how despicable they were.
Yes. So let's get into it. A quick thank you to Tom Philbin and Michael Philbin for their book, The Killer Book of Serial Killers, the Parcast podcast network, and of course Wikipedia, as well as a shout out to our podcasting network, the Shrimp Queen Network. Visit facebook.com/Shrimp Queen Network for some fantastic podcasts, probably a lot lighter in content than this one. So go listen to something else. If you're not sticking around for this one.
Come back next week. I'll have a silly episode for you.
Definitely. So, this week's episode is on the bottom
Feeders.
10. No, I was going to say bottom 10 instead of top 10. Kind of most infamous.
The 10 most.
Yeah.
Not best. Not.
Yeah. They're worst. Worse.
But if you're saying
serial
worst,
killers.
It makes it sound like, dude, they sucked at being a serial killer.
Well, then... Top 10 worst serial killers.
Top
Me.
Most awful.
You.
Wow.
Basically everybody who isn't a serial killer.
We're just awful at it. But no, the top.
Gandhi. Pretty bad. Serial killing.
Shit at being serial killer.
Obama was a bad serial killer.
Yeah.
Anywho. Meryl Streep.
Oh my
bad
God.
Serial killer. Although, fun fact, in the Civilization video games, they tried to make it's like it was a bug in the first game that just has carried over to the rest of them, where Gandhi was really, they tried to make him so peaceful that they made his aggression negative, but because of the code of the game, it doubled back and made him highly aggressive. Like they went below 0. They thought it would go negative.
Game is this?
Civilization.
Never heard of it.
And so then it ended up being like 9,999 instead of 0 or below 0. So if you attack Gandhi at all, he'll be really, really retaliatory and usually will try to nuke you in the Civilization games.
Jeez.
So that's a fun thing. Anywho, the criteria for today's list is from highest to lowest impact on ranking. The impact on culture and criminology or psychology, how despicable the person was. I wrote they and then, their MO, which stands for modus operandi, which is their mode of operation. So really how they did what they did, and how that fed into how long they really evaded capture from the authorities. So, what is a serial killer? I feel like it's good to clarify before I get into it. The U.S. federal law defines serial killings as a means of series of 3 or more killings, not less than one of which was committed within the United States. This is the U.S. law, by the way, having common characteristics such as to suggest the reasonable possibility that the crimes were committed by the same actor or actors. Most will also note that these killings are over the span of more than 1 month and have a significant cooldown period in between killings. Some form of cooldown period. Is what distinguishes them from a rampage killing, which is kind of like a school shooting or something along those lines.
Murder.
Or mass murder, yes. Where there is no cooldown period, it's usually within the span of a couple hours.
Or spree.
Yes, spree killing is the other phrase for that. So serial killers are also classified as either organized or disorganized killers. You can usually tell that from the crime scene pretty easily. And also that denotes whether or not it was usually premeditated. Organized killers are usually premeditated. They usually bring their own weapons.
They
usually figure out specifically who they're going to kill. Disorganized killers usually find a weapon at the crime scene, et cetera, et cetera. And they can also further be defined as visionary, mission, power/control, or hedonistic killers, with the latter hedonistic killers having subcategories of lust, thrill, and comfort killers. So some dishonorable mentions, people who aren't on the list but should be noted. Edmund Kemper, Peter Curtin, the Vampire of Dusseldorf, William Burke and William Hare, David Berkowitz, a.k.a. the Son of Sam, Richard Ramirez, a.k.a. the Night Stalker, Gary Heidnik, just because he was in Philadelphia, that's why I felt we should note him, Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, Andre Chikatilo, Albert Fish, the Axeman of New Orleans, and...
I know of him because of American Horror Story, Coven.
And I wrote Dennis Reynolds, ?
He's not a serial killer.
You don't know that. We don't know that. So, number 10. You may already know about this person.
Me?
Yes.
Have you told
me? Do you like
about
Charlize Theron?
I mean, yeah, but I haven't seen like everything that she's in.
Okay, number 10.
This Snow White and the Huntsman?
Yes. It's Eileen Wuornos, who was born Eileen Pittman. She killed 7 people.
Did she play her in a movie?
Yeah, that'll come up in a thick.
Okay.
Modus operandi, she would either pose as a hitchhiker and or prostitute, get into her victim's car, all were men. Her first victim, I might want to note, was a convicted rapist, so...
Good for just that one.
Yeah, that one wasn't too bad, I guess.
I was getting too hype, and then I had to take a step back and still remember.
And then she would shoot her victims with a 22 caliber pistol and rob them. Years active from November 30th, 1989 to November 19th, 1990, so almost a full year. Area of operation was Michigan and Florida. Sentence, death. Date of execution, October 9th, 2002. Why she's on the list. So Eileen Wuornos is a nature-nurture debate wrapped up in a pretty despicable package. Wuornos was born to a teenage couple. Her father was a pedophile who was in and out of mental institutions until he committed suicide, and her mother abandoned her at a young age, leaving her and her brother, who many believe...
She had a brother?
Yeah, she was...
Intimate,
yes, with.
Cersei and Jaime style.
Yeah, and may have even had a kid. That was his.
Wow.
So Eileen turned to prostitution in her teenage years and eventually met Tyra Moore, who became the object of Eileen's obsession. Eileen claimed she started killing to get money, just to live and to buy Tyra things. She claimed she was doing it for Tyra, and she also claimed that basically every person who she killed was in self-defense because they were attacking her or trying to rape her.
But after
if that maybe happened once or twice, it'd be a lot more believable, but the fact that she killed 7 people, I don't know.
And like
you never know.
The same way every time.
Yeah, very similar. And a lot of them were people who were noted as not being violent types. But then again, if there's any takeaway from this list, it's that you really cannot tell some people who are violent. Anyway, Tyra was actually eventually one of the major reasons Eileen was caught. I believe she reported her. And she was a key witness in order to put Eileen away and sentence her to death. Wuornos really showed the country that, in some cases, women are just as capable as men of committing truly heinous violent crimes. Her story inspired the Charlize Theron film Monster, for which Theron won an Oscar.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, and it's also pretty notable because a lot of female serial killers aren't as violent as Eileen. They usually opt for poison or some form of more passive killing.
I'm just thinking of, since you're saying like female serial killers, that movie Serial Mom with Matthew Lillard. It's a weird movie. It's really weird, but it has the lady from Peggy Sue Got Married with Nicolas Cage.
Wow.
Anyway, but yeah, and that's all I was thinking about during the entire time for some reason, even though it's not the same person at all.
And also a lot of women who kill for monetary gain, like Eileen claimed she was doing.
What, for like money?
Yeah, are usually classified as Black Widow killers, wherein they marry someone, get into their will, and then kill them. So they inherit everything from them. So she was really notable in the fact that really a lot of her characteristics when it came to killing were particularly masculine, i.e. she used a violent weapon, she robbed them, etc., etc. Really kind of goes against the
argument where it's like
went against the grain.
How she wasn't nurtured.
Yeah, I mean, in nature and nurture, it's like, was she always born to do this, or was it because she had such basically a terrible life from the second she was born?
You can't blame your terrible life on murder. You can't blame murdering people on like.
Yeah, I know. There's literally never really a good motive for murder.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it would excuse anything. I'm just saying it's really a debate of what caused it in the first place.
I think the only
for some people, because I think
excuse, I guess you could say, would be complete and total self-defense.
Yeah.
And even so, that's still just like, it's just hard to like decide.
And so now we're finished with the first woman on my list because...
There's more than one?
Guess what? A lot of serial killers are... the only woman on my list. A lot of serial killers are men.
What?
A lot of them are white men.
What?
What's up with that?
The fuck? And
yeah,
a lot of them are also American?
Yeah, it's really weird to... Sidebar, just kind of, again, clarification. Serial killers seem to be an extremely American invention. I don't know if it's just because
America.
Serial killers existed before then, and really we didn't start noticing them until
You're saying that they became popular
criminology.
in America?
No, well, until investigations got to the point where they could link these kinds of things together. I mean, obviously serial killers have existed basically since the beginning of time. There were killers in probably ancient Greece, ancient Egypt.
Serial killers?
Probably. But it wasn't really called serial killing at that point because killing was a lot more socially acceptable.
Jeez.
It was. But it is notable how many of these people that we think of as kind of the worst are all American and all come from a very particular span of time. Like, we don't really hear about serial killers modern day. There definitely exist, but it's not really covered that much. Like, I can't name any serial killer.
Usually they can get, with like the advancement of science and crime and stuff, they're caught much more quickly before it can be classified as
get to the point of serial killing. That is a good point. That is a good
faster.
Point. Really only
they're not sending letters to the news anymore.
A couple of these people existed, they still exist, but only a couple of these murderers were still doing it or caught after I was born. But I didn't know about it at the time. I think baby. Yeah, it was maybe 9 when the last person on this list was caught. And that's actually my number 9 choice.
Yeah, but science has made it harder for them to keep getting away with shit. And like I said, they're not sending letters to the news anymore to be like...
No, it depends on the killer.
Do people still do that?
Yeah, it depends on your classification.
Oh. No, but I'm saying you don't hear about that.
That's a characteristic of...
But I'm saying you don't hear about that.
Yeah, true. Anyway. But also it's... I don't know.
They don't seem to want to be as famous.
But also people live stream killings now as well on Facebook. That happened.
All right, go on to your number 9.
Number 9, Dennis Rader, a.k.a. the BTK killer.
I really thought you were going to say Dennis Reynolds.
No, sorry.
The what?
The BTK killer. So you'll find out in a sec.
Okay.
Number of victims, 10. Modus operandi, well, it's in the name. BTK stands for bind, torture, and kill.
I thought it was going to be a fraternity or something.
No.
Oh, God.
He would mostly use plastic bags, rope, or nylon stockings to strangle or suffocate his victims. Years active, 1974 to 1991.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Area of operation, Park City, Kansas. Date caught, February 25th, 2005.
Wait,
Sentence. What? Yeah, 2005.
But he stopped in 91?
Yeah.
What?
I said I was 9 when the last person on my list was caught.
But he wasn't even... well, we don't...
Yeah. His sentence was 10 consecutive life sentences, which he is currently serving. Thank Christ. Why is on the list? So Dennis Rader is a very interesting case, as he is one serial killer who shows that just about anyone can be capable of these sort of things. He was in a happy marriage with his wife Paula and had 2 children. Rader was in the Air Force for 4 years, around my age. He was president of the church council at his local Lutheran church, and this is going to make your skin crawl. He was a Cub Scout leader, so he was often around children, teaching them probably similar knots and how to use ropes that he was using to kill people. He worked as an ADT security systems employee in the 70s, mostly of installing security systems into people's houses.
Oh, God.
Who called the security company because they were scared of the BTK killer. So he was literally installing security systems. Yeah. So that's also how he knew how to circumvent them, because he would break into houses and kill people. Wow. He was a census field operations supervisor. So that's how he knew people in the area, knew the layouts of their houses, and then eventually became a dog catcher and a compliance officer for his local government. I just want to say, anybody who is a dog catcher, fuck you. Okay. I'm just going to say it. I think dog catching's messed up, and usually you kill the dog. Okay. And actually...
They don't personally. They take them somewhere where it happened.
Rader is somewhat of a mystery as well, because he kind of just stopped killing 14 years before his capture.
Tired of it?
But in that time, he was still sending taunting letters and stuff to police and law enforcement and stuff, but he just wasn't killing. So it's not like he was scared of being caught. He just stopped. Rader, so before this, his murders were initially very close together.
Maybe it's because he didn't think he would be caught, so he was like, you know what, I don't need to do it anymore, but I can still fuck with them.
A family of 4 and a young woman in 1974, and 2 more young women in 1977. Then there was a span until 1985 when he didn't kill. Then he killed again in 1986, and finally once more in 1991. So he's probably on this list the largest span of time between killings.
Yeah,
He would taunt police with letters and clues to find him, which eventually led to his arrest. So he was, this is a funny story. So he was eventually caught in 2005 after writing to police, asking if he could stop wasting paper, basically, and put his writings on a floppy disk to send in. And he asked the police, hey, if I send a floppy disk in, can you guys trace that back to me? And of course, they were like, oh, no, yeah, you can send that. That's fine. Like, we won't be able to, that'll be fine. Like, you can just delete everything off of it and just send your writings that way. And he did. So they found metadata on the disk for a Word document for Rader's church, which was last edited by someone named Dennis. So then this, along with security camera footage from a Home Depot where Rader he would put this stuff in cereal boxes and leave it around the town to get caught, like found by the police. And it would be like letters and manifestos and all that kind of shit. So they saw on this security camera footage a black Jeep Cherokee putting one of these cereal boxes in the bed of a pickup truck. And actually the person in the pickup truck just thought it was trash and threw it away, and then eventually the police found it. And also they used DNA from Rader's daughter's most recent pap smear, linking him to one of the murders. And that's what eventually they needed just to bring him down with. A
pap smear.
Yeah, because the DNA from that indicated that the killer of one of his victims was extremely related to the girl. Obviously, it wasn't the girl because she wasn't born when some of these people were killed. Yeah. But yeah, and he was actually partially the inspiration for the character of Francis Dollarhide in Red Dragon, who wears a stocking on his head and breaks into people's houses. He's the villain in
Voldemort?
Yeah.
Okay. You see his
and he goes
face
after
in
like
that movie.
Yeah, he goes after like whole families and stuff. That's very much
he goes
what
after Will
BTK
Graham's
was about.
fam.
Yeah, in the end he does. Sorry, I'm drinking water because it's kind of hot in here. So that's Dennis Rader, number 9. Number 8 is creepy as fuck. John. Yeah, but
Is this the clown?
yeah,
Don't.
John Wayne Gacy. Number of victims 33, but it's believed to be more than that. They don't have a specific number. I couldn't find a specific number.
That's okay. I don't need to know.
It's confirmed 33, but believed to be more. So Gacy would lure young men and boys to his home with the promise of work. He owned a contracting business. Once there, this is MO, by the way. Once there, he'd give them drugs or alcohol and generally gain their trust. Then he'd ask to show them a magic trick that involved them putting on handcuffs. Like he'd be like, hey, put on these handcuffs. I want to show you a cool magic trick. There's a doggy outside. And he is going off. We'll try to talk through the dog.
It's okay.
And so
they were
what is believed is he told law enforcement afterwards they would put on the handcuffs and then he would tell them, well, the trick is you have to have the key, and then he would start attacking them. So once they were in the cuffs, Gacy would torture and rape them, eventually strangling them with a rope. He would then stash the bodies in his basement, crawl space, backyard, and a couple in the Des Plaines River.
Oh, he just like kept them almost all at his home. Okay.
Years active, January 3rd, 1971 to December 11th, 1978. He was apprehended 10 days later than December 11th. This dog.
Is he
okay?
Yeah, he's okay. He sounds like he's hype.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, it's neighbors. Can't really do much about that.
It's a dog. Everybody loves dogs.
Okay. Area of operation. Illinois, specifically the Chicago area, greater Chicago area, and he was executed on May 10th, 1994. So why he's on the list? So
I wasn't born yet. Sorry, I'm just really...
Yeah. Are you saying that maybe his soul
is in me?
Traveled?
No.
When people mention serial killers, Gacy is often one of the first to come up. Like when you mention serial killers, he's usually up there.
I don't mention serial killers often, so I couldn't tell you that that's a fact.
So of the people on this list, Gacy is truly one of the most repulsive. His younger years were riddled with aggressive and sexual crimes and behaviors that he perpetrated. He was actually arrested at age 16 for raping another boy. How the hell he would go on to start his own business, get married, and become a prominent member of his community. So also just listen how many times I say...
He was married?
That they were either married or prominent members of their community, because a whole lot of them were. So that's just kind of scary. So Gacy's he first killed in 1972 when he picked up 16-year-old Timothy McCoy from a Chicago Greyhound station. He let McCoy crash at his house, and this is all according to Gacy. He woke up to McCoy standing in his doorway in the morning carrying a kitchen knife. Gacy sprung into action and attacked McCoy in, quote, self-defense, and eventually turned the knife on him and killed him with it.
And that's what
and
made
then
him like
Gacy went to the kitchen and found McCoy had set the table for breakfast for the both of them and was in the process of making bacon and eggs for breakfast for the two of them as a thank you to Gacy for letting him crash there.
Wow.
And he was just walking into his bedroom to wake him up and ask him what he wanted for breakfast, and he was just holding the knife. Gacy hid McCoy's body in his basement crawl space, but had allegedly now just gained a taste for murder. I doubt this story. I think he just killed him. I think he made this up. So Gacy was eventually caught after promising a young boy named Robert Peist contracting work while the boy was working at his family pharmacy. So Peist went missing after telling his mother he was just going with Gacy to just talk about a job. Mm-hmm. The police tracked Gacy down and found evidence to convict him of this crime.
Was that kid murdered?
Yeah, sadly he was. But, I mean, it's really sad that he was murdered, but also his murder led to them catching him.
Yeah.
It's still worse that he was murdered.
So you're saying nobody else mentioned to, like, their family or whatever that they were going?
No.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's just so many.
So in an investigation of Gacy's home, police found the bodies of 29 victims.
Fucking
and his mostly 27 of which were just in his basement crawl space. I don't know how he fit them in there, but he did. 2 others were like just buried in his backyard or something like that. They eventually demolished his house, and that like just to see if they could find any more. And then the others were found at the Des Plaines River, like I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So Gacy was sentenced to death and was executed on May 10th, 1994, as previously mentioned. Gacy is also on this list because of one of his community pastimes, which was dressing up as a clown for children's parties and events, because that's fucked up.
Great.
Yeah, Pogo the Clown. Google Pogo the Clown, and just be terrified.
Don't. Clowns are awful.
Yeah.
Just awful.
And he's evidence of this.
Yeah.
That no clown is good. Ever. Except for like Jim Carrey, but he doesn't really count as a clown. He's just like a funny guy.
He's not a clown.
Clown. He's a bit of a clown.
He's a goofy guy. He's not a fucking clown.
Hey, get a load of this clown.
All right, go on.
Hey, sorry. Number 7. Jeffrey Dahmer.
I
He
still
killed
want to see the movie about
17 people. Yeah, I actually mentioned that.
I've heard it's very interesting. It has Ross Lynch from the Disney Channel.
And one of the Naked Brothers band.
Nat Wolff.
No, Alex.
Oh, it has Alex?
Yeah. So he killed 17.
Wow. Disney and Nickelodeon. Kids starring in a...
Yeah. It's not really, it's more of a drama than like a horror movie or a thriller.
Yeah.
I've heard. So
he's
he's killed
as a teenager.
He killed 17 men. His modus operandi. So Dahmer would mostly meet his victims in or near local gay bars. He'd then invite them, his victim, to his house at the request of taking pictures of the person in exchange for money, alcohol, and or drugs. So once there, Dahmer would drug his victim and kill him through strangulation. Dahmer would usually do things to the corpse before cutting it up to dispose of it. All of his victims were male. Years active, June 18th, 1978 to July 19th, 1991. That's a pretty long span.
Yeah.
Area of operation was mostly Ohio and Wisconsin. He was apprehended on July 22nd, 1991, so just a couple days after his last murder. And his sentence was 15 terms of life imprisonment, but he was killed on November 28th, 1994 by another inmate.
Oh, damn.
So why he's on the list? So Jeffrey Dahmer's name is another that usually comes up in early conversations pertaining to serial killers. His childhood was not ideal, and he had a fascination with death from an early age, often killing animals and collecting the remains of other animals that he found. Despite this, he initially had a decent school career and was known to within his high school as kind of the class clown, so much so that, quote, doing a Dahmer was the school's phrase for pulling a prank.
Oh my God.
They probably got rid of that pretty quick in the early 90s. But his grades dropped when his parents separated, and Dahmer developed a drinking problem at an early age. It was also pretty believed at this point that he was starting to realize that he was gay and he couldn't really accept it.
Okay.
He committed his first murder just 3 weeks after graduating high school, June of 1978 or whatever that was. He is slightly unusual compared to most of the other killers on the list, as he initially did not like killing and opted for what he believed was the most humane way to murder someone. Like he didn't really take pleasure in the actual act of killing. So what Dahmer wanted was power over his victim and eventually his victim's body. Dahmer is infamous not only for killing and violating his victims' corpses, but for also cannibalizing a number of them. Dahmer drank throughout the entire process of killing and took Polaroid photos at every stage. It would be these photos that actually proved to be Dahmer's undoing. So after an unsuccessful attempt to handcuff a 32-year-old man named Tracy Edwards went back to Dahmer's apartment with him, who said he was going to pay him to take these pictures. When he got there, he noticed a really, really gross smell. And like Dahmer was like just basically like feeding him beers. And he noticed that there was just a copy of The Exorcist 3 just playing in Dahmer's bedroom on repeat. He was there for 5 hours.
Random.
And multiple times Dahmer tried to get him to put on handcuffs for a photo, and he said no, but Dahmer forced one on, so he was just kind of stuck with one. And he eventually escaped by just distracting Dahmer for a quick second and punching him in the face and running and finding some police officers. And he was just asking the police officers, he said, like, hey, this guy was weirding me out. Can you get these handcuffs off me? But their key didn't work. So he was like, okay, I guess I'll just lead you back to his apartment just so he can get the key. So they went back to his apartment to get the key to the handcuffs that were stuck on one of Edward's wrists. While looking for the key, one of the officers stumbled upon the Polaroids, and initially thinking that maybe Dahmer had just bought them somewhere, he then noticed that a lot of the settings of the photos were the exact same as in the apartment, and they arrested Dahmer on the spot. He was sentenced, as I mentioned, to 15 terms of life imprisonment in 1992, but was murdered by another inmate with a piece of metal from a workout machine in 1994. Dahmer has also been the subject of multiple films, most notably the film Dahmer, starring Jeremy Renner in the title role, and 2017's My Friend Dahmer, which was based on a graphic novel, which we were just talking about.
In his teens.
What? Yeah, it's about the graphic novel was written by a guy who knew Jeffrey Dahmer in high school and was allegedly his best friend at the time, and just really like about how he was in school, and it ends with the first murder.
Yeah.
So, number 6, Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer. Number of victims 49, but he confessed to 71.
Oh.
Only 49 of those could be corroborated. So his MO, Ridgway would pick up sex workers and runaways, all of whom were women or young girls, rape and strangle them, then dump their bodies in forested areas, or initially the Green River. His first 5 victims were found there.
Green River?
In Washington.
Okay.
And then once they started to pick up on that, he started to put them other places. Ridgway would often return to the bodies to do things to them. Years active: 1982 to 1998, but possibly 2001. The last confirmed kill was in 1998, though. Area of operation, as I mentioned, Washington, specifically one of their highways. I can't remember what the highway was, that he would just kind of patrol for girls walking along the side, hitchhiking. He was caught on November 30th, 2001, and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, which was a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. So why is on the list? So Gary Ridgway is, in terms of confirmed victims, the most prolific serial killer in America's history. He has the most confirmed kills of any of them. He first attempted a murder. Sorry, I wrote my thing down wrong. When he was 16, when he led a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him in the chest. Thankfully, the young boy survived the ordeal. And then Ridgway was somehow able to join the Navy after having that on his...
Oh.
Yeah, and went to Vietnam, where he he saw action, as they say. So Ridgway most likely started killing due to aggressive and sexual feelings towards his abusive mother. He was married 3 times, but was generally described by many as strange but friendly. His ex-wives all described him as being sexually aggressive, though, and having basically an insatiable lust. Like, he would expect them to have sex multiple times every day. Yeah. So, as previously mentioned, Ridgway was confirmed to have killed 49 women, the youngest being 15, the oldest being 38. The number is believed to actually, by many, to be 71. Most of these murders occurred between 1982 and 1984, with Ridgway often killing 3 or 4 women a month, just within this span, basically, that whole time. Aside from having the highest confirmed victim count of any serial killer in America's history, Ridgway's interests, he interests me because of the investigation to find him, actually. So not only did it employ 2 of my personal criminal/psych investigation heroes, John Douglas and Robert Keppel, but another prolific serial killer who will appear later on this list lent a hand to the investigators to help build a profile of the killer. This relationship between Keppel and the killer, who will be named later, went on to be an inspiration for Thomas Harris's The Silence of the Lambs.
I was going to say, wait, you mean like Hannibal and Clarice?
So Ridgway was eventually caught due to DNA evidence connecting him to 4 of his many murders. After his conviction, he is quoted as saying, "Here I am, Gary Ridgway, the guy who everybody thought was slow since elementary school, but here I am, and I'm the best at something." Which is just seriously fucked. So he is currently serving his life sentence without parole.
Good.
Number 5. Number 5 is a little controversial, and I'll explain why. It is Ed Gein. Have you heard that name before?
No.
The reason it's controversial is because the number of confirmed victims he has is 2. So he may technically not be a serial killer. It's believed he's killed more. He's suspected in many crimes around his local area. After it was found out that he did all these things, I'll get into it.
Oh, were they like, so that was probably...
Yeah. His MO, which really can't really be established because he only confirmed killed 2 people, was shooting his victims with a .22 caliber rifle, then defiling their corpses. Not doing things to them. It's believed he might have done those things to them, but he was quoted as saying that he didn't because they smelled bad. He would, So years active, roughly early 1946 to 1957. Area of operation was Plainfield, Wisconsin. He was caught November 16th, 1957. His sentence was to be institutionalized at Mendota Mental Health Institute, and that is where he died on July 26, 1984 of lung cancer. So why is on the list? You're probably saying, this guy is only confirmed to have killed 2 women. He's not a serial killer. He didn't even kill enough people to have a well-recorded MO. And you would be right. Jess, you were saying these things to me now. I can see it in your mind.
Excuse me?
He is believed to have killed more women. Specifically, he is a very high suspect, notable suspect in the disappearance of a 15-year-old girl named Evelyn Hartley.
One suspect?
Yeah, after all this stuff came to light, they were like, oh, yeah, it was probably him who did that. But Ed Gein is on this list, not just because of the murders he committed, but the sheer impact he's had on American pop culture and general culture and criminal psychology. So here's a quick bio about Gein, and please stop me and let me know if it reminds you of anybody, specifically 3 people.
Me? Stop you?
Yeah.
Why should it remind me of anybody?
Yeah, the second you recognize something like you did with the Silence of the Lambs, just stop me and say, that sounds like this person. So Gein lived on a farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin with his older brother, father, and mother. Due to the isolation of the farm, Gein's mother had a strong influence over him and his brother and would often brainwash her sons with harsh religious extremist views, i.e. that all other women are inherently evil prostitutes, and that's a quote, and would punish...
Sorry.
And she would punish Gein and his brother for trying to make friends at school, saying like that they didn't need to have friends because she was their friend.
God.
Gein's father died.
People who are like, my kid is my best friend. I hate you.
A boy's best friend is his mother, Jess.
Stop.
Gein's father died in 1940 of heart failure, and his brother died 4 years later of a heart attack after he and Ed had accidentally set a wildfire. Gein's mother suffered a stroke soon after his brother's death, and Gein was her main caretaker. She died in late 1945. Gein was quoted as saying he'd lost his only friend and one true love, and that he was absolutely alone in the world now that his mother was dead.
The Red Dragon guy.
That's one. It was soon after this that Gein started exhuming graves of women in their late 40s and early 50s, much like his mother, to take their skin and body parts to make paraphernalia for his home. And he also started work on a woman suit so he could...
Bill.
Yeah. So he could become his mother, whose body he kept in the attic of his house.
Oh.
He shot and killed Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, who were his 2 confirmed victims, between his mother's death and his apprehension. His apprehension was very soon after killing Worden because her son was the deputy sheriff, and he noticed that she went missing, so he obviously investigated it. So when police raided his home, they found Worden's decapitated body hanging upside down in Gein's kitchen, gutted and dressed like one would do to a deer carcass. They also found, and these are just a few of the things they found in his house, not the whole list, because the whole list is even more messed up. A lamp made of human skin, bowls made from human skulls.
It's like Leatherface?
Yeah, that's another one. Okay. Masks made from faces, a belt made from female nipples.
Ow.
thought you were going to do that. The workings of Gaines' woman's suit and many more fucked up things. So while you may have already guessed and just did, different aspects of Gaines' story went on to inspire three of the most famous horror characters and film/book characters of all time. Actually, no, I didn't think of Red Dragon.
You didn't?
So
I thought
got
of that
one.
because of his mother being like...
No, you missed probably the most obvious one with the mother. Norman Bates in Psycho.
That's because I don't like Psycho. I think it's a dumb movie.
Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. I also read that he inspired the character of, I wouldn't be able to corroborate this because I haven't seen it, of Dr. Oliver Thredson in American Horror Story Asylum.
That's a season that I actually haven't seen. Okay. Because I heard it's not the best. Like, it's like good, but I heard that the ending, it's just like, wait, aliens? What? He
also captured the nation's interest and really showed how disturbed a person could be in modern times. Yeah. He's considered kind of the first like modern day killer.
Okay.
Yeah. Guess what? When I was researching this, I didn't want to, but I stumbled across a picture of the nipple belt, and it is literally as bad as you think it is, if not worse.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, I didn't want to either.
I didn't need to know that.
It was just right there on Wikipedia, and I was like, God.
But I thought of the what's his name, Ray Fiennes from the Red Dragon, because of the mother being so like strict and like religious, because his like traumatized him.
Yeah.
For being so strict and shit.
Yeah.
And then what's his name? The Hulk used it against him in the end by yelling at his own child, and it brought flashbacks, and then he was able to
kill. Because he's playing
Norman. Wait, what's his name?
He's playing Will Graham.
No, what's his name?
Francis Dollarhide?
No, the actor.
Edward Norton.
Thank you. I just kept thinking the Hulk. It's the Hulk and Fight Club.
Yeah.
The Fight Club.
So, number 4 is
he does a very, very good woman's voice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, actually, it was one of these people who I was researching, and one of them wet the bed until he was about 13, and every time he wet the bed, his mom would clean him until he was 13. Oh. Like, yeah, that a lot of them have bad relationships with their mothers.
Yeah.
So number 4.
Moms, don't be fucked up.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'll have a serial killer as a child. Is Jack the Ripper. He killed 5.
Side note, Dan said he almost forgot about Jack the Ripper until he saw something in like
I saw the Yorkshire Ripper and I was like, oh
shit.
Fuck, Jack the Ripper, I gotta have him on my list.
I immediately assumed that he would be on it because he's like the one that everyone knows.
But he's number 4 for a good reason, and I'll explain why. He killed 5 people confirmed. They're called the canonical 5, but possibly killed more. His MO, Jack would target prostitutes working in the Whitechapel area of London in the early hours of weekend mornings. Almost all of his victims were actually killed by strangulation, which is something I didn't know. I thought he stabbed them all. Only one wasn't killed with strangulation. He would then slit their throats to drain them of blood and eviscerate them in a ritualistic fashion. Mm-hmm. Years active, so possibly August 7th, 1888, but definitely August 31st, 1888 to November 9th, 1888, but some say up to 1891. There's a lot of confusion surrounding him. Area of operation, as I mentioned, was Whitechapel in London, England. He gave it to himself, I think.
Because was he one of the letter writers?
Yep, he wrote the letters.
Wasn't he not caught?
Yeah. So why he's on the list. So Jack the Ripper is and always will be a huge mystery in the criminal world. He was one of the earliest recorded serial killers if he was just one person. That's a huge area of debate as to whether or not it was just one person, or maybe one person did the first 2 and then the rest 2 were copycats or something along those lines. And he has never been identified, which just kind of adds to the legend of it.
Do they have, like, suspects?
Yep, I'll go over some later. He's confirmed to have killed and eviscerated 5 prostitutes in London's Whitechapel area in the late 1800s, 2 of whom were killed on the exact same night. All of this was done while Jack taunted the police and often took souvenirs from his victims. The most famous tauntings are the Dear Boss, From Hell, and Saucy Jackie letters, which were usually sent along with souvenirs or very, very explicit details of the crimes to prove their authenticity to the police. And in one he said, I'm going to take the ears off my next victim, and then his next victim didn't have ears. So they were like, well, that was probably
It could have been a policeman.
So the Dear Boss letter was sent first, and it read, Should I do an accent?
No.
I'm going to do an accent.
This isn't like a fun thing. Good Lord.
Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't. It just doesn't want the accent. Okay, no. But they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they took so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. They thought he might have been a butcher who wore a leather apron. Yes. I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping till I get ripping them till I do get buckled, which I guess means caught. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. So he took some blood from his last victim, but it congealed.
Yeah, that happens.
Red ink fits enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job is just like, he's like, I wanted to write with blood, but I couldn't. So red ink,
but I want you to know that.
The next job I shall do will clip the lady's ears off and send to the police. Ooh, geez. Just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so sharp and nice, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance.
How long is this letter?
Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. So he did name himself. P.S. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands, curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha.
Damn.
Just turned out my computer.
Long.
Yeah, so the PS was a reference to the popular theory that Jack was probably a surgeon or doctor given his knowledge of the inner workings of human anatomy and ability to easily and carefully disembowel his victims, take like very specific parts without damaging them. So many have attempted to figure out who Jack really was, if he really was someone at all. In 1988, 100 years after the murders, John Douglas, who I mentioned earlier, and who is actually the inspiration for Jonathan Groff's character in the show, Mindhunter.
Oh, okay. Which I didn't watch because I don't like this content very much, but I'm doing okay.
Even profiled Jack, saying that he was classified as an opportunistic lust killer, probably driven by feelings of anger towards his mother, who Douglas theorized was probably a prostitute who drank a lot herself, because all of his victims were as well. Many law enforcement officials agree he was a man between 25 and 35 of medium height with a stocky body and definitely a mustache. I saw the picture of all the composites.
Why a definitely?
I guess it was just kind of the style of the time. He was also
had to have a mustache.
Probably charming and would appear very normal to his peers and contemporaries. Like it was very much kind of like a dual personality, like something would kind of like snap in him.
He's a jokester.
Yeah. But I mean, even just in that letter, it kind of disproves he may not be a doctor because he would have known that the blood would have congealed and he wouldn't have been able to use it to write with.
Wasn't there a show, not like recently made?
Yeah, where it was about like Jack the Ripper like being teleported into the future.
And he's like modern day here.
Yeah. He would be caught in like 5 seconds in a modern society. Yeah, and somebody else
was like sent to.
Like literally there's a story about how when he killed 2 women on the same night, he probably just ran straight by or walked straight by police who were going to the first body, and then he went and killed someone else.
Oh.
So the most popular suspects are Montague Druitt, Sewerin Klosowski, Aaron Kaminsky, Michael Ostrog, John Pizer, James Sadler, Francis Tumblety, and even Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, Queen Victoria's son. So in 2017, some people think it's a big cover-up by the royals. In 2017, DNA tests were run on a silk shawl that was allegedly belonging to Catherine Eddowes, who is Jack's 4th victim, that may indicate Kosminski as Jack the Ripper.
As the Jack?
Yeah, but this hasn't been really confirmed. Some people say it's like way too late to test that. Some people also say, yeah, he could have been one of the Jack the Rippers. There probably was multiple. Some fucked up guys were just like, hey, this is my chance to maybe get away with this.
Yeah.
But some believe that Jack the Ripper, and this was the subject of an 8-part History Channel documentary, some believe that Jack the Ripper was an American visiting England, and specifically that he was number 3. Number 3, H.H. Holmes, who was born Herman Webster Mudgett. Yeah.
Sorry.
So his victim count is the subject of a lot of debate. So he is confirmed to have killed 9 people. He confessed to 27, but some experts believe it to be around 200.
I thought you were going to say like 2.
No.
Damn.
So his MO, asphyxiation mostly, although he would often torment and torture his victims and experimented with multiple ways of dispatching them. Usually he killed for monetary gain, though. I think that it classifies him as an opportunistic one. I don't know, or something along those lines. Yeah. He was active from 1891 to 1894 in Chicago, Illinois, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Ontario, Canada. Date caught November 17th, 1894. Sentence, death. He was executed in Philadelphia. So, ayo, suck on that, H.H. Holmes, you bitch. Anyway.
Well, there.
So why he's on the list. Many point to Holmes being America's very first serial killer. Until he started killing, though, he had quite a normal life. He was a bright child and man, and was married 3 times, although sometimes he was married to more than one wife at once, and they didn't know this. He graduated university and even had a son. He was a well-known con man, though, and saw through many schemes in his lifetime. He reaped the life insurance of many of his victims as well. Like, he would employ them and then take out a life insurance policy on them because they were his employee and then kill them. What sets him apart, aside from being America's first serial killer, is the manner in which he killed many of his victims. Holmes devised, funded, and saw to the creation of his
Is this the house guy?
murder castle in Chicago.
Oh my god,
yes.
yeah.
It was a 3-story building built by multiple contractors.
How many rooms were there?
Fucking tons. With stairways to nowhere, winding maze-like corridors, trapdoors, hidden torture rooms, and even chutes hidden for easy disposal of bodies. So Holmes would often
I think in American Horror Story Hotel, James March.
Yeah, it's something along those lines.
It was like similar. He had a bunch of like hidden things.
So he would mostly lure young women there to hire them to work in his, quote, hotel, but would eventually torment, torture, and kill them. Yeah,
that's who it was based on.
So Holmes was captured after an insurance fraud scheme went awry for him. So he'd planned with his accomplice and I guess you could call him best friend.
He had an accomplice?
Yeah, well, in most of his cons and some of his murders.
Oh.
But this guy was only doing the murders for the insurance money thing, like that kind of stuff. Benjamin Peitzel. So he told Peitzel to fake they were going to fake his death, and then his wife was going to collect the insurance money, and she was going to split it between herself and Holmes. And Peitzel's wife was in on it. Instead of finding he was like, I'll find a cadaver and we'll burn it, and we'll say that it was you. And Peitzel was like, yeah. And so instead of finding a cadaver to use for Peitzel, Holmes just murdered Peitzel by setting him on fire.
But
and then
Peitzel's wife knew.
Yeah, and then told his wife that he'd gone into hiding in London. And that's why he wasn't around. And he was like, so Holmes also convinced Peitzel's wife to let him have custody of 3 of their 5 children.
Why?
And she agreed. He told her the plan was to meet in Canada with them traveling along a parallel path. And he would have 3 of the children. She would have the other 2. One was a baby. One was her oldest daughter. So that like they wouldn't be seen together. So like they wouldn't suspect that it was like a whole cover up, which it was. So instead of meeting her there, the children went missing. And Holmes is confirmed to have killed 2 of Peitzel's daughters in Toronto, and then Peitzel's son in Indianapolis.
Jeez, what happened to the 3rd kid?
That was 3. Her daughters, 2 of her daughters. And then the son. Okay. He was finally caught in Boston by Philadelphia Pinkerton agents who'd been tracking him since the whole ordeal with Peitzel's life insurance started 3 months ago in Philadelphia. Holmes was tried for just the murder of Peitzel and was sentenced to death by hanging in Philadelphia. A film about H.H. Holmes is actually in development and is to be directed by Martin Scorsese and star Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh.
And he was featured prominently, as you mentioned, in American Horror Story Hotel.
It was James March?
I think he was. If not, he was just
Evan
a
Peters'
character at some point. Yeah.
Well, I think because James March is the one who created the hotel.
Yeah.
And all of his torture rooms and shit like that.
Yeah, it was heavily based off of him.
Yeah.
But some people also say that the hotel was kind of exaggerated by news reports at the time. We can't know because they demolished it.
And weren't there or didn't the blueprints that were just completely fake?
Well, yeah, because he would do is he would hire multiple contractors so that nobody except for him, exactly what was going on. Damn. But he would have rooms where he'd be able to gas people with stuff.
There, another house that was supposedly haunted though? Not the
Winchester house?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just.
But that was it was supposedly haunted, not for murder times.
Yeah, that was Mary Winchester. She believed that she was being haunted by every person who had been killed with a Winchester rifle, and that's why she just kept expanding the house until she died. So that the ghosts would be confused. Yeah. And not be able to catch her.
They made a movie about that.
Yep.
And there were ghosts in it.
Who's the main? Who played the lead in that?
Shit.
I was thinking Glenn Close, and then I was thinking Meryl Streep, but it's not. It's neither of them.
It's not girl Meryl.
It's but she's up there.
I'm gonna find out.
Number 2, Ted Cruz.
Helen Mirren. Sorry. Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren is a fox. I'm gonna come out and say that.
Yeah, she cute.
So, number 2 is the Zodiac Killer. He killed a number of victims.
I'm sorry, you mean Ted Cruz?
I said that, but you said Helen Mirren at the same time.
I overshadowed
Ted
Cruz with Helen Mirren.
He had 7 victims. 5 were killed, 2 were seriously injured. He is suspected to have killed 3 more, but he claimed to have killed 37. MO. So Zodiac typically targeted couples in secluded areas and favored shooting his victims, but did actually once use a knife. Years active. So from December 1968 to October 1969, but possibly up until November of 1972.
Is this where those 2 guys that you love come into play?
No.
The 2 that found him? Oh, I thought that you really liked them.
What?
Or the 2 that were investigating. There was a movie that
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
They're all cool guys.
Yeah.
Zodiac's final letter was actually sent in January of 1974. Area of operation was San Francisco, California, and all the surrounding areas. So why he's on the list? So the Zodiac Killer is hugely prolific in America's history. He brutally murdered 5 people within the span of a year and terrorized San Francisco for years afterwards. He kind of just disappeared, but continued taunting police and reporters long after he stopped confirmed killing. He's never officially been caught either, which, like Jack the Ripper, adds to the legend of the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer favored to attack young couples who were in secluded areas, usually for romantic reasons like on a date or making out, whatever. The most horrific of these crimes, in my opinion, was perpetrated in Lake Berryessa. So Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were having a picnic by the lake, broad daylight, when they spotted a man dressed entirely in black with the Zodiac symbol emblazoned on his chest. The couple believed they were just being robbed, so they followed the Zodiac's instructions. He had a gun on them to tie each other up. But once tied up, he didn't take their wallets. He produced a knife and stabbed both repeatedly in the back and sides. A man and his son were fishing nearby and heard the screams for help and arrived in time to save Hartnell's life, actually. But unfortunately, Shepard died 2 days later in hospital. She fell into a coma and never woke up. So Zodiac would often report his crimes and even record them at or near the crime scene. For example, he wrote on Hartnell's car door, Vallejo, 12/20/68, 7/4/69, September 27th, 69, 6:30, by knife. So he took credit for the first 2 crimes he'd committed already and then took credit for this crime. He wrote that in black marker on the side of the car. Yeah, you can see.
Does the marker, the type of marker matter?
I don't know.
Okay.
And then he wrote Oh, it's the dog. It sounded like a beep. I thought my computer was like messing up. It sounded like a boop. Oh, boof, boof to you, sir. And then he wrote the big zodiac symbol, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, which is like the cross with the circle around it. Mm-hmm. So Kathleen Johns is another person who ran into the zodiac and lived to tell the tale. This is pretty horrific, but it's good for her. So she was driving down the highway near San Francisco, kind of a secluded highway. The baby? Yes. And the person behind her kept flashing their lights at her and was like, pull over, pull over. And so she did. And this guy was like, hey, I noticed your back tire's wobbling. Do you want me to just tighten it up real quick? I have like a crowbar or whatever to do that. And she said, yeah, sure. Iron. Thank you. Tire iron. Yeah. And he was like, okay, cool. And then he did that. And then he drove off and he was like, all right, have fun. And then she started driving and she noticed that her car started to wobble and then her back tire fell off. He just loosened the bolts and then he came back around and he was like, oh, that's terrible. You want me to give you a ride to where you're like the nearest rest station? And she was like, yeah, sure. Thank you. She had a baby at this point, a couple months old. And so they were driving along the highway and they passed multiple gas stations and she was like, hey, you missed it. And he was like, no, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill your baby. And so she waited until he seemed like he was kind of distracted and she jumped out of the car with her baby.
Was the baby not in a car seat?
And she hid herself and the baby separately, just so in case he found her, then the baby would be safe. Hopefully be safe.
And eventually found, hopefully. Okay.
And he wasn't able to find her, so he drove off and she flagged down another car. They brought her back to her car, but it had been gutted and set on fire. Like it was completely, it was just a husk.
So they take her to the police station?
Yeah, so it couldn't be, and no DNA could be found. Oh God, this dog, man. So what made the Zodiac famous definitely was the fact that he wasn't caught and his communication with law enforcement and reporters. He would send encrypted, taunting letters to the San Francisco's police department and local newspapers, and even called into a local TV news show once. There are clips of this online, and it's really, really creepy. Like he's like live on air. That's like the famous, like, this is the Zodiac speaking, like that.
Yeah.
That thing. So some quotes in his letters include, I like killing people because it is so fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, which was spelled incorrectly with 2 R's, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. And then in a later, that was, I believe, one of the first letters he sent. And then in a later one, he said, school children make such nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning, just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. So everybody in San Francisco was terrified at this point. People
weren't letting... My kids would be staying home with me.
People were driving their kids to school instead.
Like, I would just keep my kid home at
everything.
That point.
Like, just terrifying. And I think that's what he wanted more than he wanted to kill people was just like the feeling of power from that. So the closest police came to catching the Zodiac was actually after he murdered Paul Stein, a cab driver. So 3 teens witnessed the crime because it was in the middle of San Francisco, which is very different from a lot of his other kills.
Have the drawing of?
Yeah, and called the police. Well, that as well as
what's her name?
Another person survived. There was her, Kathleen Johns or Jones, I believe it was Johns, as well as Hartnell and also a young man as well, who survived another attack. Actually, in the Zodiac movie, he's the one who's from One Tree Hill. He gets like shot in the neck.
What?
Yeah,
I don't remember. Sorry, guys. I really love One Tree Hill. Which movie?
He's the one who kind of looks a little bit like Goofy.
Is it just the Zodiac?
It's just called Zodiac.
Zodiac.
Yeah.
God, so I'll let you know in a minute. Hold on.
I'll wait for you. Mouth. That's his name. In One Tree Hill. Yeah. Okay. He survived. He's played by him.
I can't think of his name in real life.
Even though he was like shot, I'm pretty sure in the face or something like that.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I'll talk about it in a sec. But this is a really frustrating story.
It's Minkus from Boy Meets World.
Yeah. So the closest police came to catching the Zodiac was after he murdered Paul Stein. So 3 teens witnessed the crime and called the police. So patrols immediately started in the area. Police were canvassing, and 2 police officers even stopped a man who was now believed to have been the Zodiac killer.
Ted Cruz.
But they let him go because dispatch falsely told police to be on the lookout for an African-American man.
So they most likely
the kids didn't say. Yeah, a lot of people believe they actually caught the Zodiac killer and then just let him go because he didn't fit what they were supposed to be looking for. Isn't that the worst?
It makes me really angry.
So the Zodiac story has been one of much speculation, and many even discuss it to this day. It was the subject of book later turned great film Zodiac, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Mark Ruffalo, and Robert Downey Jr.
And Lee Norris.
And all 3 of those people are now in the MCU, so that's pretty cool.
Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yeah, he's playing Mysterio in the new Spider-Man movie.
Who?
The guy with the fishbowl on his head. You've never seen what Mysterio looks like?
Why
Look him up.
He have a fishbowl on
He's one of Spider-Man's villains. He actually doesn't have any powers. He uses a lot of tech.
Are they gonna put a fishbowl on Jake Gyllenhaal's head?
Possibly, probably. They gotta.
Oh my god.
Anyway, he was also the inspiration for the Scorpio killer in the first Dirty Harry film, and the Gemini killer in
Scorpio because of Zodiac.
And then Gemini killer in Exorcist 3, which actually the last letter he wrote.
Hey guys, side note, I have never seen any Exorcist movie. No, I saw The Exorcism of Molly Hartley.
That has nothing to do with The Exorcist.
And it has nothing to do with them, but that's the only movie that I've seen where exorcism is in the title.
Awesome. So his last letter was actually a review of The Exorcist 3 that he sent in, I think, to the San Francisco Chronicle or something.
So while he was active, they were making movies with characters based off of him?
Yeah, actually, one of them came out while he was literally still killing people. Like, he hadn't ended, he hadn't stopped killing people. Okay. But yeah, and he referred to The Exorcist 3 as a comedy. And as I mentioned, Jeffrey Dahmer loved The Exorcist 3 as well. So that's kind of fucked. Also, apparently, the character Sylar from Heroes was loosely based on the Zodiac too, because...
You mean Zachary?
Yeah, because Sylar gets his name from looking at a watch brand, and some people believe that the Zodiac killer did that too.
In a shop, like a watch shop,
yeah.
He fixed them. And it was like his... I haven't watched years. I need to rewatch.
And of course, he appeared in American Horror Story and was the inspiration for the Black Hood in Riverdale.
In American Horror Story,
he's referenced in Hotel, in
Hotel.
Yeah, he apparently shows up at some point.
See, I didn't finish that one, guys. Look, my relationship with American Horror Story is a difficult one. I try almost every season. I've watched 2 full seasons, and this current one I'm getting into. But I have tried with every season.
And apparently, he was referenced in Cult, I believe, as well, something like that.
I watched the first 15 minutes. And I couldn't watch anymore because Evan Peters coated his skin in Cheeto dust, and I was like, no. No, thank you.
So possible suspects include Jack Terrence, Lawrence Kane, Bruce Davis, Richard Marshall, Louis Myers, who claimed to be the Zodiac on his deathbed, Evan Van Best, Ted Cruz, and Arthur Lee Allen, who is so clearly the Zodiac killer, it actually hurts that they didn't catch him. No, they didn't get that person's name. They literally saw him.
Get his name?
Yeah, and they were like, "Hey," and then they're like, "Okay, move on." Wow. So this is my sidebar and a quick case against Allen, and it pisses me off.
Okay.
So he admitted to having bloody knives in his car on the weekend of the Zodiac stabbing in Lake Berryessa, but claimed that the blood came from a chicken he had killed for dinner. Who does that? He was in jail for child molestation during the time of the Zodiac's 1971 to 1974 hiatus in communication. His guns, fingerprints, and handwriting all compared to the case, but he was cleared. Okay, whatever. But then back again, some people said, well, maybe that's not really the case. Also in 2002, a DNA comparison was made between a stamp from the Zodiac killer and Allen's DNA and came back negative, although Allen had stated that he never licked stamps because the glue made him feel sick. And also some people believe they tested the wrong side of the stamp that he would have licked. So
how do they test the wrong side?
And in 1991, survival Michael Maggio, who was played by Lee Norris in the movie, pointed him out when shown a set of Zodiac suspect photos from the times of the killings.
Oh, and he specifically... Oh,
yeah, he was given a lineup. And at one point...
Trying the actual person, not just the character.
Arthur Lee Allen told a coworker that he wanted to kill people, and if he did... he would go by Zodiac because it was the brand of watch he owned, and the watch's face bore the same symbol that the Zodiac would draw when he was signing off letters and correspondence with. What the fuck? And this dude died a couple of years ago, so we can literally never know.
Oh, wow.
And he's so obviously the fucking Zodiac killer.
But Ted Cruz.
That's what, yeah. So the book and movie Zodiac is making the case against this guy because that's who the guy who Jake Gyllenhaal played in real life. He believed that Arthur Lee Allen was definitely the Zodiac killer. And there's actually a really fucking great scene in the Zodiac where he uses, Jake Gyllenhaal's character uses crime scene analysis of text and handwriting and stuff, and tracks it back to this one movie theater, and they all have custom posters made for them, and he matched up the writing, and he was like, I gotta find who does this, and he was told that it was the projectionist, so he goes to the guy who owns the theater's house, and he's like, hey, can I just look at some of these posters in real life? I just gotta see them. And so the guy's like, yeah, I have them all in my basement. I keep all of my records so I can find out anything you need. And then he goes down there and he's like, why are you interested in the posters? And he was like, oh, they're really fascinating to me. I really like the artwork on them, but also I think maybe the Zodiac killer wrote them, made them. And then the guy's like, oh, well, that's weird because I'm the one who writes them. Oh. And it's just Jake Gyllenhaal, oh God, it is one of the most tense scenes in any film because he's like, okay, let's go down to the basement. And obviously Jake Gyllenhaal is like, I have to get out of here, but I can't let him know that I think he's the Zodiac killer because if he is, he'll kill me.
Oh God.
Oh God is the worst. But yeah, such a good movie. I want to watch it again, but it's 3 hours long.
Oh God.
So that ends the Zodiac killer.
Jeez, I think that was the longest one yet.
Oh, this one's going to be longer.
Do I know?
Number 1. Jess probably already knows who it is.
I don't think I do. I can't think of any. I don't just know serial killers off the top of my head.
He's the one that I wrote the paper about.
I don't remember who that was.
Okay.
Oh God, because I told you that you weren't allowed to talk to me about it. Because I was getting so, stop.
I turned into Will Graham for a little bit there.
Yeah. I needed it to end, so I think I banned you from speaking about it for a little.
Yeah. So number 1 on this list of the most infamous serial killers in history is Ted Bundy.
Oh, okay.
He was born Theodore Robert Cowell.
In my head, Ted Cruz was on the mind, so I didn't think that there would be another Ted on the list.
In Vermont, he was born, but then he spent the first 3 years of his life growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
What's with Philadelphia?
I know. His number of victims is believed to be upwards of 30, but I think it's only confirmed around mid-20s. So he has a pretty intricate modus operandi, one that evolved, actually, which is interesting to note, and that's why he's kind of a little bit fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. So initially, Ted would break into his victims' homes or rooms, beat them on the head with a blunt object, and then sneak them out of the house to take them to a second location.
Secondary location.
Never get taken to the secondary location.
Thank you, John Mulaney and Detective J.J. Bittenbinder.
Eventually,
I was watching that last night.
Actually had his MO down to a T. He would lure his victims to his car, which was a tan VW Beetle.
Okay, never mind.
By requesting help, posing as a police officer, or even just flirting with them, asking them to go on a date.
The sorority.
Yeah. Okay. Once close to the car, Ted would hit her over the head with a blunt instrument he'd stashed away earlier, usually rape her in the car, then take her to a second location to torture and kill her.
Jeez.
He would hide the bodies in wooded areas and would return to them at later times to do things to them or take body parts such as heads, but also would change their clothes and apply makeup to them.
Oh, God.
He mostly targeted girls in their late teens, early to mid-20s, with dark hair parted down the middle.
Did you just look at my hair?
Yeah, just to make sure.
I don't have
He was
dark
active
hair.
from February 1974 to February 1978. Area of operation, basically a lot. California, Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, or Utah, Washington, and Florida. He would just kind of travel around. He was caught initially on August 16th, 1975, and then again on June 13th, 1977, and again on February 15th, 1978. I'll get to that. His sentence was eventually death by electrocution, and he was executed in 1989. So why he is number one?
Why did he keep getting free?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
In my books, there is no one sicker and scarier than Ted Bundy. The nature of his crimes were absolutely horrendous, but the scariest part of him was how well he was known to be a nice guy by many of his peers and friends. Anne Rule, who would later go on to write one of the most seminal texts on Bundy called The Stranger Beside Me, worked with him in a suicide prevention hotline call center.
Dude.
And she noted that Ted would often stay after hours to continue talking with someone to ensure that they would not kill themselves. Like, he was really invested in it. And that actually made me think of a quote from Hannibal, where Hannibal says that saving a life can be just as satisfying as taking one. And often he gave her rides home. She said she never felt in any danger around him, even while he was driving her in the Beetle that he would rape and murder girls in. And even though he was probably the most dangerous man in America at that point in time. And he would always say, like, hey, just make sure that you're not going like home alone. There are a lot of, creeps out there.
People out there.
He was an upstanding member of his community in college. He was, I think, a leader of his kind of local Young Republicans club or whatever it was. And he was an aspiring law student at one point. Ted had an abnormal childhood, though, and grew up believing that his real mother, who bore him at a young age and out of wedlock, was actually his sister. And that
one of those?
Yeah, his grandparents were his real parents, but he wasn't told the truth until late in his developmental years. They probably should have done it earlier. And this made him resent his mother and probably all women on some level. Yeah. Bundy was a known peeping Tom in his community and is actually suspected to have killed at the young age of 14. Whoa. As an 8-year-old girl went missing from his neighborhood and her house was on his paper route. His subconscious hatred towards women was probably exacerbated when his longtime college girlfriend broke up with him, and she wore her dark hair parted down the middle.
Oh.
He attended multiple colleges, including Temple University.
God.
And he had many close girlfriends and even proposed to his then girlfriend during his trial, and she said yes.
He proposed during the trial?
Yeah. She said yes. The trial was just an overall media circus shit show, and he actually represented himself because he had studied law at this point. And he had like fans, like he had girls who would come into the
Was he like an attractive?
He was
guy,
pretty
like
good looking. Yeah. Especially I guess back in the 70s, and one of the biggest traits he had going for him and probably how he evaded capture, even though his MO wasn't really that perfect. Mm-hmm. And he would often show his face to multiple girls at once, and the girl that would go missing would go with him, was that he, weirdly enough, his facial hair and his regular hair grew really fast.
Oh, so he could just
he was able to shave it or grow it out. And he looked completely different. Like there are pictures of him at multiple stages, and he looks like a completely different person. But yeah, he had like teenage girls that would come to his...
growing your facial hair so you can change your identity.
Yeah, come to his trial and like sit there and like cheer for him. And they would send him letters saying that they didn't think he was guilty and all that stuff. So Bundy started killing in February of 1974 officially by breaking into homes, as previously mentioned. He killed... But then he, developed his MO. He killed 18 women across 5 states before him being arrested for the first time in 1975. So Bundy was spotted by police cruising a residential area of Granger, Utah in the early morning hours. He tried to speed away after being spotted, after he spotted the patrol car and they spotted them. Yeah, but he was probably, scoping out the area.
Oh, okay.
The arresting officer noted that Bundy's front seat passenger seat was removed. and that Bundy had a ski mask, pantyhose mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bag, a coil of pipe, and an ice pick and a kit in his car.
Why was his seat removed?
Oh, because what he would do is he would put his victim, lay them down next to him. Yeah.
Okay.
And also he would use that too.
Yeah, I got
an easy area to attack them. But he was originally arrested on kidnapping and burglary charges. Like they didn't suspect him of murder at this point.
Jeez.
Because like the stuff in his car looked like what you would use to rob a house with. As well. It just reminds me of Dennis Reynolds again with the tools. I have to have my tools.
I like to bind. I like to be bound.
My tools.
Fetish it.
Dude, why do you have bleach in the back of your car? We could go on forever. So he actually escaped from incarceration twice. The first time, he represented himself after being caught the first time. He represented himself in court, which meant that he didn't have to have handcuffs and ankle bracelets on in the courtroom. So during a 15-minute recess,
so what did he seem like more?
Well,
he like actually just like
he was representing himself.
I was gonna say I thought like he got off because
no. He requested to visit the
loo.
No, the court library to review some text, like to review some cases. And it was there that he jumped out of a window, but he sprained his ankle really badly doing so. And he was on the run for 6 days before being caught
still
again.
Were like, nah, he didn't do it.
And then he spent some time in jail, but planned his escape from actual prison. It really, it's crazy how smart he was. Like, he was obviously a smart person. What he did was he planned to escape during the Christmas break because he knew that there would be less staff and that they would generally just be distracted. So what he did was he cut or like pushed something out of his ceiling. It was a tiny hole, though, that he couldn't fit through at that point. So he just kind of stopped eating and lost 30 pounds so that by the time he would be able to escape, plan to escape, he would be able to. So he crawled out. He crawled through the ceiling and came down in an area that usually would have a guard on duty, but didn't at this point because of the change in schedule, and escaped the prison that way.
What the fuck?
And he was on the lam for about a year. And so this is when his MO really just started to deteriorate. And he resorted to kind of a rampage at the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University, where he killed 2 students and permanently injured 3 other girls. His final victim was sadly his youngest confirmed victim. Kimberly Diane Leach, age 12, was kidnapped by Bundy as she left her middle school's play. So Bundy was caught the final time in the early hours of February 15th, 1978, after being pulled over by Officer David Lee, after Lee noted that Bundy's car resembled a car that was reported as stolen in the area, which it was. But you could see he was trying to get back into his original MO of just taking a girl instead of breaking into places. So Bundy tried to kill Lee by stealing his gun, but Lee actually won the tussle and arrested Bundy, not knowing who he had just caught. Lee has stated that after arresting Bundy, Bundy said, "I wish you had killed me," as he was being put into the car. And Lee was like, "That's weird."
What do you mean?
So as I mentioned, he represented himself in his own...
Imagine like arresting someone and just be like, yeah, he was just doing some like weird shit, and then being like, he was what?
Yeah. As I mentioned, he represented himself in his own trial and held on to his innocence until the day of his execution, more or less, where he finally admitted to his mother over the phone that he was guilty. This was also after he gave detailed reports of his crimes to law enforcement and psychological investigators that led to the recovery of multiple bodies, and he'd helped a certain Robert Keppel track down Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer.
So that's how, okay.
He's inspired characters such as Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs, whose MO was taken from Bundy. He pretends to be trying to get some furniture into the back of his car with a broken arm.
Hannibal by helping Clarice, right?
And also he would use the broken arm thing a lot, as well as pose as like a police officer and stuff. And Francis Dollarhide and Red Dragon as well with the home invasion idea.
Yeah.
And he has been portrayed in films by Cary Elwes, James Marsters, and an upcoming film.
Like Spike?
Yeah.
I met him.
He's to be played by Zac Efron in a movie that's coming out soon, a biopic about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bundy's evil shines through with his sense of ego and a perfectly crafted mask of innocence and normality. He really showed the country at that point that anybody, like literally anybody you knew, even if they seemed like a really good person, a really upstanding citizen, could be a demented killer. Yeah. And demonstrated what a modern serial killer could be like, what they're capable of, and how truly dangerous they were. And that is why he's number one on my list. But not in a good way.
Of shittiest people.
Yep. Hey, that's kind of my list. Top 10 shittiest people. Thank you for listening to this episode. Take a breather. Take a bubble bath.
Get hyped for, like my episodes are usually a little bit more like, hey guys, guess what I like? And next week it's going to be my top 10 witches in film.
Are any of them going to be male?
TV movies or
on screen.
On screen witches. There's a possibility of male.
Although I guess that's technically a warlock, witches. Isn't it?
And I'm going more like, yeah. And I don't know if I'm going to do like one, if like say a movie has more than one that I enjoy, I might have just those two as like one number because they're from the same exact like universe, all that stuff. I won't be doing any TV, so sorry Sabrina, love you bitch, but no, I'm not doing TV ones.
She's the teenage witch.
Because then I would also have to have Alex from Wizards of Waverly Place.
Then do that.
No.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Sorry, it was a little bit heavy. We tried to make it as light as possible, but it's kind of hard to do with this kind of subject matter. And I didn't have much to add. I could only every now and then be like, oh yeah, I know what that one is. Oh yeah, that's an American Horror Story. Everything's an American Horror Story, honestly. Yeah, be sure to follow us on Twitter at 10for10pod. Follow us on Facebook for 10 for 10. Check out our Podbean, 10for10.podbean.com. We are now on Spotify, so you can follow us there. It's a lot easier to listen to Spotify stuff. Shrimp Queens. Check out the Shrimp Queen Network on Facebook, facebook.com/Shrimp Queen Network. All one word on the URL. Body roll while saying that. Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode of 10 for 10's Shocktober. Happy October. Yeah, it's good. It's candy. Still not candy corn. It's still not crisp outside, though. No, which I don't like it. I like it to be crisp because then, it's easy to decompress after these kinds of things. You just walk outside. It's a nice night. Well, whatever. You know what, guys? All right, we're going to go to Target. See you later. Watch something funny. Love yourself. There's a Harry Potter marathon on Sci-Fi. Don't be a serial killer. Or is it Sci-Fi? Arthur Lee Allen was most definitely the Zodiac killer. If not him, Ted Cruz. What's he hiding? Ted Cruz, Kevin from The Office, because they have the same face, just different sized bodies. Ted Cruz, true Zodiac. Yeah, and don't go diagnosing people with psychopathologies if you're not a registered psychologist. But I didn't know how. Just take a second look at those people in your life. Maybe one of them might be a serial killer. Oh God. There are only like 50 active serial killers in the U.S. at once. Oh, great. So, one for each state, basically. I think there actually is one in our kind of area, like kind of the Philadelphia area right now. Yeah, I think I heard about it. I mean, great. Okay. Lock your doors. Yeah. Lock your cars. Lock your children. Yeah, but would that even do anything? Ted Bundy just broke into houses, even if the door was locked. Put an alarm system up and a camera. Yeah. But Dennis Rader installed those alarm systems and he knew how to circumvent them. You buy one yourself. True. You put them where you know. Yeah, I know. It's scary stuff, basically. Live in a padded cell. Yeah. Although I'm pretty sure you have more of a chance of being struck by lightning than being killed by a serial killer. Also, we live in an apartment. What's more likely, being broken into in a house or an apartment? Well, actually, there's this really good, kind of grindhouse movie called The Toolbox Murders. It's more likely that several people will hear you in an apartment building. Well, there's this movie called The Toolbox Murders, which I suggest. And in it, the villain, it's a slasher. The villain is the maintenance guy because he has keys. Oh, God damn it. I like our maintenance guy. He has keys to everybody's apartment, so he could just get in really easily. And he knew how to open all the doors easily and stuff like that. Creepy. But yeah, you know.
Find your hiding places.
Be
vigilant.
Vigilant, yes, but not paranoid.
But vigilant.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Love ya.
Bye.
See you next week. Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer.
Bye.
You heard it here last, folks, because he's gonna come kill us now.
This podcast is part of the Shrimp Queen Network.
Visit facebook.com/Shrimp Queen Network to see more great podcasts.
Hear them.
Hear more great podcasts.
Good job.
Thanks for listening.